Hey, what's up? This is Nick with Motorcycle.com, and today we just got done riding the 2025 Stark Varg Supermoto, or Stark Varg SM. Now, here's the deal. Stark is a brand that came to us in 2020, and in a fast 5 years have developed now a total of 3 models. Now they have the original Stark Varg, which is the MX bike. They also have the Stark Varg EX, the dual sport or enduro, depending on where you're from. And of course, they've expanded that into the next logical step, which is the SM or Supermoto that you see here. So, what do I want to say about an electric Supermoto? Here's the thing. For me, the Supermoto platform and just expanding that from a dual sport platform, like I said before, is the next logical step. That's really where you want to take that sort of concept and run with it, because well, Supermotos are just damn fun. That's what they're built for, and that's pretty much all they can achieve, which is a really good design brief to work with. So here's the deal. Let's talk about how this thing kind of came together and what it's doing in this first ride view. Now, normally in a first ride view, we'd start talking about the engine. In this case, we have an electric motor, a water-cooled electric motor, more specifically, that is sourced from the MX and EX models. Now, peak horsepower is 80 horsepower and a pretty insane 674 foot-pounds of torque, which is just an astronomical amount of torque if you think about it. But really with, managing that power through controllers and whatnot, it is something that can be as tractable and linear as you want it to be, or not, because with the advanced modes you can go into the various ride modes and start customizing things on your own. But that's cart before the horse. Now, it does have a 7.2 kilowatt hour battery, and if you're not really familiar with the whole EV thing, what that equates to is roughly a claimed 50-ish miles. Overall, you're looking at recharge times that take from about 20%. Stark representatives say something like an hour and a half. From dead zero, you're looking at about a 2-hour recharge time. Now, with the Supermoto model specifically, as you guys look at this bike, you're gonna notice something that's not here, which is a charger. The Supermoto is actually releasing a new product, something that they've dubbed the backpack charger. So really, there's a small little charger that you can hoist on yourself and carry around with you, weighs about 4 pounds. That's how you get the charging done. So, some of the nerdy stuff out of the way, what I really want to talk about is the actual motorcycle. This is a derivative of the Varg EX, so it shares the same dual sport frame and all of the things that came along with it. But this is a Supermoto, so there's going to be some critical differences. Now, as you guys noticed, 17-inch wire spoke wheels. That's what you need on a Supermoto. The main changes you're going to see from the EX to the SM are different triple clamps here, with a lot more reliefs machined into them. So that's gonna add in flex characteristics, bring some feedback into the equation just because it is a road going bike. The suspension length is actually the same thing as the EX model, with a critical difference in that the fork lowers are specific to the SM model. And that's really to carry over the Brembo stylemic caliper, radial mounted caliper, on this backside here with the 320 millimeter rotor. It does have different triple clamps, like I mentioned before. Offset is much different, so it gets brought in quite a bit. Went from something like 20 millimeter to 16, so they've really tightened that up, changed the geometry arguably a little bit there too. And they've also changed the offset with those lowers, so just changed where the axle sits. That's gonna alter your trail and things like that as well. For all intents and purposes, this is an EX frame, this is an EX swing arm. Different wheels. And that's kind of the Supermoto recipe. So let's get into riding. Now, you jump on this thing and you start running around, and it feels like a proper Supermoto. It should. It weighs about 270 pounds charged, I guess, not wet, because there's no fuel or fluids to speak of other than coolant. And well, it's just a happy-go-lucky Supermoto. I mean, it's incredibly light as far as motorcycles go. Yeah, it's 270 pounds, and if you wanted to compare it to a contemporary, you'd be looking at something like the KTM 450 SMR, because of its just absolute bonkers performance for something of this weight. And, handling-wise, we're running a bike that is a pre-pro model, so pre-production, and unfortunately, they did have the heavier springs in play for these models. So that's one of the really cool aspects of Stark, is that they allow a lot of customization from the point of purchase. So you can get 3 different spring settings, heavy, medium, and soft. They have different weight recommendations, which off-road guys, you guys are gonna know that the moment you get a bike, you start messing with the suspension to dial it in for you. In our case, we're running the heavier springs, which I'm definitely not heavy enough despite my American background and diet. So it looks like I can just gain a bunch of weight. Realistically, you're looking at a bike that just handles incredibly well in the sense that it's insanely light. And despite the fact that it was oversprung, which means that the feedback was a little bit too great, bump absorption wasn't quite what we'd want it for the street, and you had to really push into the suspension to start creating grip and feedback and things like that, it's still an incredibly well-handling motorcycle, even in some environments that you might not think so. So we got some rain in Barcelona, and I admittedly was a little bit worried dealing with 60-ish horsepower with no rider aids to speak of in wet conditions. The fact is, this chassis creates a lot of mechanical grip. You get on the brakes, you really put some nice weight and get some weight transfer on the front end, you can start pushing. Same with the rear end. It hooks up, it drives. The seats, definitely not built for comfort in any respect. Quite tall in that respect too, but you know, it's okay. It is insanely narrow. What I would like to see is just redevelop this seat kind of more in your DRZ sort of fashion, a little bit wider, a little bit more squared off, and a softer foam. And that would definitely help improvement. Now, Stark representatives have said that they're working on a comfort seat, and they're trying to integrate that into future options. Whether we see that come to fruition, I'm not sure. As far as braking performance goes, you have a single stylemma up in the front. Stylemmas are on a great many superbikes. Now we've bumped up to the high pure with a select few, but realistically, you have some serious stopping power up there. I wouldn't say it's, one finger stopping, because the brake pull is quite firm. The master cylinder that they're using up here is an 1821. I think there could be a little bit of leeway and wiggle room there just to get a bit more feel and sort of squish into the lever, because if you can see me actuating the lever, there's just not a lot of sweep before you really get into the bite.
One of the coolest features about the Stark Varg SM is that it's direct drive, meaning there's no transmission or need to mess around with shifting. That also means there's no clutch lever. In place of that, we have a rear handbrake, which replaces the usual foot pedal actuated rear brake. Per DOT rules in the United States, SMs shipped to the North American market will have the typical foot pedal actuated rear brake installed, though the handbrake will be included separately. It's an awesome feature and highlights how much more precise modulating brake pressure is done with your hands as opposed to a boot-covered foot, which really helps when you're trying to control wheelies or initiate slides.
Now, the performance. Look, the main aspect and the main draw of this thing is that when you buy the optional Alpha mode, which brings peak horsepower to 80 horsepower and 674 foot-pounds of torque. And realistically for me, you have 5 standard fully customizable modes where you can adjust regenerative braking, which for all intents and purposes is just engine braking. And then you can also adjust peak horsepower output. So for me, you can go all the way down to maybe 10 horsepower minimum, and then slowly ramp it all the way up. For my 5 modes, I started at 40 and then went up to 80. I really found that putting this thing at about 60 horsepower was kind of that sweet spot. You whack open the throttle and you can loft the front end. It has tons and tons of power for the road. And really all you're concerned about is battery life at that point and how you're using it. So obviously it's the same thing that we deal with internal combustion engines. If you start whacking the throttle on, high RPM, high sustained RPM is the enemy of mileage, or MPG rather. And an EV suffers the same reality. Criticism that we always have about Supermoto platforms is that they're one-dimensional. They're fun, but you can't tour on them. They're fun, but they're not the most practical thing in the world. They're fun, but now the same thing we've always said about EV bikes, where if only we could charge them faster, if only they had more range. The thing is, this bike is actually playing to what normally would be weaknesses, but in this case is a strength. Supermotos are short, fast attack vehicles. It doesn't have a lot of range. 50 miles is not too much. But if all you want to do is go and rip around and you happen to live at the base of a twisty road, or near a kart track and you like collecting tickets, it's hard to argue against the fact that this is a no maintenance, extremely high performance supermoto, and it's just damn fun. And for me, that checks a lot of boxes when we're talking about the niche supermoto class. So we're gonna wrap it up here in Barcelona with the 2025 Stark Varg SM. And if you guys have any questions, go ahead and drop them down below and we'll get you some answers. As for me, I gotta move on to the next press trip, so take care.